Great, good afternoon. A bit earlier this morning in Washington, the Secretary General met at the White House with U.S. National Security Advisor General H.R. McMaster. Following that meeting, the Secretary General also had the opportunity to meet with President Trump. The Secretary General and the President agreed to meet again in the near future. The Secretary General felt that he'd had an interesting and constructive discussion on cooperation between the United States and the United Nations. As you know, the Secretary General was in Washington to attend the spring meetings of the World Bank and the IMF. And this morning, after his meetings at the White House, the Secretary General participated in a panel discussion entitled Financing for Peace, Innovations to Tackle Fragility, along with World Bank President Jim Young Kim and the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker. Mr. Guterres stressed that, quote, the best and most necessary investment is investment in prevention and in addressing the problems of fragility before it turns into conflict. It is absolutely essential to find a way to divert the massive use of resources in managing crises to what is necessary to do to prevent them and to build the capacity of societies to solve their own problems, he added. He also said that the international community must combine the peace and security approach with the sustainable development and human rights approaches. In addition, he emphasized that because of the scale of the needs, it is crucial to stimulate innovation and fully mobilize the private sector. And his remarks were webcast and I think are up on the World Bank website as well. And I just want to flag another event that the Secretary General will have when he comes back to New York. He'll be back in New York Saturday evening, and on Sunday he will attend the opening dinner of the 15th Plenary Assembly of the World Jewish Congress here in New York. He will deliver remarks. That will be at the Hilton in Midtown Sunday evening. If you're interested in attending, you can contact the World Jewish Congress through Charlotte in my office, who has the details. And earlier this morning, just a note from Somalia, earlier today, the World Food Programme airlifted life-saving food supplies to drought-stricken Somalia for the most vulnerable people, particularly children. A Boeing 747 arrived in Mogadishu carrying 47 metric tons of high-energy biscuits, enough to assist 31,000 people for 3 days, as well as critical medical supplies on behalf of the World Health Organization. And update from our colleagues at UNHCR regarding the Democratic Republic of the Congo. The current spike of violence in the KASAI provinces of the Democratic Republic of the Congo has forced 11,000 refugees to seek safety in Angola. They reported fleeing attacks from militia groups who are targeting police, military officials, and civilians. Some parents have sent their children across the border, worrying they would be forcibly recruited by the militias if they had stayed in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. UNHCR is also currently coordinating responses with the government, local authorities, and partners on the ground, but stress that further aid is urgently needed. And our colleagues at UNIFIL in southern Lebanon tell us that Lebanese Prime Minister Said Hariri today paid his first visit to the headquarters of UNIFIL as part of his tour of the UNIFIL area of operations in the southern part of the country. The head of mission and force commander, Major General Michael Berry, received the Prime Minister and his delegation, including the defense minister and the commander of the Lebanese armed forces. The force commander commended Prime Minister Hariri for reaffirming Lebanon's commitment to Resolution 1701 and a permanent ceasefire. And yesterday, a UN, ICRC, and Syrian Arab Red Crescent interagency convoy delivered food and other assistance to 33,500 people in need in several hard-to-reach villages in the northern area of rural homes in Syria. The last interagency convoy in this area was on October 20th of last year. Some items, including sanitation and health supplies, were not allowed to be delivered by the government authorities. The UN continues to call for safe, sustained, unimpeded humanitarian access to all those who need it in Syria, particularly the millions in hard-to-reach and besieged areas. And UNICEF said today in a report that more than 150 children have died crossing the central Mediterranean from North Africa to Italy this year. However, the agency stressed that this number is almost certainly higher since many children are unaccompanied and their deaths go unreported. Since the start of this year, nearly 37,000 refugees and migrants, 13% of whom are children, have reached Italy by sea via the central Mediterranean, an increase of 42% when compared to the same time period in 2016. And WHO, the World Health Organization, today issued its global hepatitis report for 2017, revealing that 325 million people worldwide are living with chronic hepatitis B virus, HBV, or hepatitis C virus, HCV infection. The large majority of these people lack access to life-saving testing and treatment. As a result, millions are at risk of slow progression to chronic liver disease, cancer, and death. The full report is on WHO's website. And today in the Trusteeship Council, the General Assembly is having an interactive dialogue on harmony with nature to commemorate International Mother Earth Day, which is being officially observed tomorrow. The theme of the dialogue is Earth jurisprudence, and will discuss expert recommendations to improve the relationship between humankind and the Earth in the context of sustainable development. And to flag a couple of things for Monday, my guest on Monday will be John Ging from OCHA, who will brief you on the trip to Mali. On his mission to Mali, which he's, I think, conducting right now. And on Monday, we'll also have a press conference at 11:15 on the 10th anniversary of the UN Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. And attending will be Mariam Wallet Aboubakrini, Chair of the Permanent Forum. She's from Mali. Chief Willie Littlechild, Grand Chief of Treaty No. 6 from Canada. And Mililani Trask, a Hawaiian Sovereignty Movement. And at 11 a.m. before that, there will be a meeting in the General Assembly Hall on Indigenous people. And today we thank India and Portugal for joining the honor roll, which brings us up to 87. Carol.
Meetings in Washington, and the fact that the Security Council is going up there on Monday. Can we say that there's really a new level of engagement between the U.S. and the UN, or is that overstating it at this point?
You know, I'll let you do the color commentary. I think obviously the Secretary General was pleased to have the opportunity to meet with the President, pleased to have a good discussion also with General McMaster. As I said, President Trump invited President Trump and the Secretary General agreed to meet again in the near future. I think it's important. It was an important meeting to be had. Obviously, it's an important relationship, and I think we're pleased. We're very pleased that the meeting happened. As for the Security Council going down there, I mean that's really an initiative of the presidency of the Security Council of this month. But we're obviously pleased that is going on. Evelyn, and then sorry. Your microphone, please.
Thank you. Was General McMasters in the same meeting with the President and the Secretary General?
Yes, he was. Okay, yep, and then Matthew.
Thank you, Stéphane. Yesterday, the Secretary General made a call to try to get the parties to the conversations in Venezuela. Today, things are getting worse. We know that at least 3 people are dead in the streets. The protests continue. But the president of Venezuela has said that he's going to give guns and arms to civil members of the Venezuelan people that are part, according to what he says, of Plan Zamora, which is a structure that allows civilians to be able to have guns. The Foreign Minister of Colombia was here this week, and she spoke to the Secretary General about this particular subject. And we know the President of Colombia has expressed his concern because of the border between both countries. Second part of that question is the Secretary General, what is his reaction to that complaint or that alert given by the Colombian government? And then the second part is today the President of Venezuela said that he is going to start giving details of the peace process that was agreed between Colombia and the FARC because they were part in some of the negotiations. And he said that he is going to give out the dirty secrets of what it was behind the process. Would that present a threat to the Colombian peace process that is being followed by the UN?
I don't have anything to say in reaction to your second part on the FARC. Obviously, we'll wait to see what is said, if anything is said. The peace agreement in Colombia that the UN has been working very hard to sustain and to help is a critical agreement in helping Colombia go back on the path to peace, and it's a very important work I think the Colombians are doing with help from the United Nations. On the situation in Venezuela, we're obviously keeping an eye on it. We're concerned at the violence that we've seen, at the deaths. Also concerned at the impact that it's had regionally. We've seen over the last number of years, according to UNHCR, a spike in the number of people who are asking for asylum in various countries in the region from Venezuela. And I say we'll keep an eye on it. If we have more to say, we shall. Yep.
Sure. I want to ask you a couple questions. But first on this visit, I just want to be sure. It seems like you just said that it was in the same meeting, but Sean Spicer said at 11:25 that the Secretary General had already met with McMaster and would be having a, quote, drop-in in the Oval Office with President Trump.
Right.
So
the way I interpreted Evelyn's question, the way I answered it is, was General McMaster in the meeting with President Trump?
Okay.
Yes.
And was it a drop-in? I mean, how long did the meeting take? If it was described as a drop-in, how long?
The Secretary General, General McMaster walked the Secretary General to the Oval Office, and they met, I think, for 15, 20 minutes with the President.
Okay, I wanted to ask you on Burundi. Inner City Press has reported, and I believe has some confirmation from the French mission, that there is a proposal by France and possibly the EU for a UN envoy to Burundi, specifically Burundi only, not conflict prevention, Michel Kafando, the former transitional president of Burkina Faso. I wanted to know from you whether the Secretary General has discussed this proposal with the proponents and whether he thinks, given the urgency of the situation, that it's a good idea and what the next steps would be.
I have no comment on that.
Okay.
Stefano? And then, sorry, then we'll go.
Thank you, Stéphane. Yesterday at the White House, the President Trump met the Italian Prime Minister Gentiloni. And during the press conference, Gentiloni stressed the need for help Italy, in this case United States, for the stabilization of Libya. And it looked like the Italians were very worried because things are not going well. And in that case, Gentiloni asked Trump directly help. President Trump answered actually no. He said that we will help maybe against ISIS, but no involvement at all of United States in Libya because they have too many other things to think about it. So my question here is, first of all, if the Secretary General noticed this issue of Libya, and what is the role of the United Nations here? Can they have a role in this? You know, there is Italy very nervous, asking for help, and it seems like...
Well, I mean, I'm not going to try to interpret the meaning of both Prime Minister Gentiloni's and President Trump, those two comments. I'm not exactly sure what they're referring to. What I can tell you is that obviously the UN is involved on the political process in Libya. I think Martin Kobler gave an extensive briefing to the Security Council, which you all saw a few days ago. The Security Council backs the UN mission. The U.S. is obviously part of that, of the Security Council, a permanent member. So we are focusing on that. I'm not sure what the Prime Minister was referring to in terms of what he was asking of the United States. So that's an issue that I'm not going to interpret. What we're focusing on is the backing of the Security Council for our work in Libya. Yep.
Yes. Is the UN doing anything to attenuate the conditions of Africans in Libya who are suffering enslavement, as reported by the International Migratory Commission?
Yeah, it's something we have, the UN has flagged through our comments by the International Organization for Migration. I think unfortunately, our ability to be present throughout the country due to security situation is very limited. The horrendous cases that we are seeing of migrants from sub-Saharan Africa and the way they're being treated in Libya, as flagged by the IOM, has to do with the lack of progress on how to manage migration flows, where the issue of how refugees and migrants, how people on the move are treated, is being left in the hands of criminal gangs and smugglers instead of having managed pathways for people to move. Carol.
Stéphane, just getting back to Washington, can you tell us how, whether the issue of U.S. funding for the UN was raised and what the tenor of that discussion might have been?
No. What I can tell you what I can, sorry. No, exactly. No, I can't tell you that it wasn't raised. No, I mean, in speaking, in getting a readout this morning, it was clear that it was a good conversation, interesting one on U.S.-UN cooperation. So I think I would leave it to you as all the things that do fall under the rubric of U.S.-UN cooperation. Carmen.
Thank you. The expert on human trafficking has called on the Cuban government to update its legislation and take new measures to avoid this activity of human trafficking. Do you have any other comment on this, please? And this is the first time that a human rights expert can visit Cuba in 10 years.
The work of the human rights expert is independent. What is important, and obviously it's not for us to comment on everything they say, but what is important and what we support is for member states to work with all the parts of the human rights mechanism, including the special rapporteurs, and that they be allowed to visit a country, do their work, and report openly. Yeah, and then go ahead.
Thank you. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on what was discussed during the meeting with McMasters, since it sounds like that went on for a much longer time.
I would leave it, unfortunately, for you under that same rubric. Yeah, go ahead, Sam. Go ahead.
Thanks, Steph. There's a video that came out yesterday showing the members of the Egyptian army carrying out extrajudicial killings in Sinai and then staging events to make it seem like the people that were unarmed were fighters. Have you seen the video? Does the SG have a comment or does the UN have a reaction?
I've seen the video on the news reports. We have no way to verify the veracity of the report. As a matter of principle, and something we stated often and often again, is that the fight against terrorism should not be at the expense of human rights. But as I said, on the particular video, I have no way of knowing whether it's of its veracity.
Can I just follow up?
Yep.
I mean, it appears to be filmed by members of the Egyptian army themselves. And also, if you look at the pictures that the Egyptian army released on their Facebook page, it matches the video, and it shows them with the guns. So what more do you need to see?
That's what I have to say for now. If I have more to say, I shall say it to you. Yep. Go ahead, please, NHK.
Thank you, Stéphane. Yesterday, DPRK UN mission delivered a press release that is criticizing your comment about the UN Security Council's resolution and so on 17th April. Do you have any comment on that?
I don't, as a rule, I try not to comment on people who comment on what I've commented on. So I've said what I've had to say, and I will leave it at that. Yep.
Jonathan Sanders from ICAST News. With the news coming out of Israel from the defense minister's meeting yesterday that there is a ton or more of sarin gas in Syria, I'm wondering if the right to protect doctrine would authorize preventive strikes to destroy this before it could be used on the Syrian people.
That's not something I'm willing to comment on at this time. I think what is important is that there be full cooperation with the relevant entity, and that is the OPCW. As you know, there was a joint UN mission which cleared Syria of the declared stockpiles of chemical weapons, and if there's more, it's important that that be investigated and dealt with so we don't see the horrendous incidents that we've seen in the past. Matthew, yeah, sure.
The reason I asked in that form, you remember we've been struggling over what in international law would authorize such things, and we never discussed the right to protect as an issue for the American strike on the base. Is that a possible rationale under international law?
It's a fascinating question, but as I've said at the time, I'm not going to get into analyzing the legality of what happened. Mr. Lee.
Sure, thanks a lot. I want to ask about Cameroon and Haiti. On Cameroon, after 94 days, the internet was turned on in the two Anglophone regions, but the government has said if there's any further use of the internet for, they say hate speech, other people say it's any opposition to the government. So I wanted to know, what is the UN's comment on how, going forward, the right to internet in those areas? You also had asked me to ask UNICEF who the resident coordinator is, acting resident coordinator, and I have, and they confirmed receipt of it, but they haven't stated it. So I'm just wondering, shouldn't there be an online site saying who's in charge of the UN system there?
I mean, I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will get back to you. You can check with UNDP as well, but I just don't have the name in front of me.
And my other question is that there are many people that were arrested during these 94 days that are still in jail in Yaoundé, and I'm wondering who in the UN system is going to follow up on.
Well, I mean, I would refer you back to what Mr. Senifal said, and he said he would be back. He would be back in Cameroon. And on Haiti?
And on Haiti, I wanted to ask, I'm sure you've seen the article in The Guardian about the failure of the UN to assist and cooperate with women who've had children by peacekeepers, they say, getting DNA tests. There's one case in particular where the woman was 16 at the time, which is under the age of consent, and the UN did a DNA test in February 2014, but has not, according to her lawyers, shared it with her. How is this consistent with the statements about accountability and about zero tolerance to not share this DNA test with a person who, it seems, was victim of statutory rape by a UN peacekeeper?
My understanding from our colleagues in the mission is that of the cases that are discussed in the article, 8 out of the 9 are in our records. Out of the 8 cases, 1 is closed, where paternity has been established, and ex gratia payment has been made for child support by the mother to the mother by the member state, and the other 7 we're following up regularly with the concerned member state. In some cases, paternity has been established through DNA testing, and the mission is facilitated between the victim and the member state. And in others, we're in touch with the member state to facilitate DNA testing and process the claim. We've requested the ministry to encourage the lawyer to provide credentials of one of the victims whose name does not appear in our record. So as far as I understand, the cases are being followed up on, and it's clear that the member states of this, the peacekeepers who are being accused have a responsibility to cooperate and to pay the mothers of the victims, and if there was a crime, that these people be persecuted.
Can you explain in English what ex gratia means, and can you also say how much is paid when a UN
I don't have the
peacekeeper-
information because that is something that's issued between the member state and the member state and the family. Ex gratia just means a cash payment, as far as I understand it. But you're the lawyer, so you may know more. Carol, and then Evelyn. Sorry.
Stéphane, as you know, there's an important election, first round voting in France this weekend, and the Secretary General has spoken frequently about populism and his concerns about that. So, in light of all this, would you like to say anything about the election in France?
No, we're not going to comment on the vibrant electoral process that's going on in France. The Secretary General has said what he has said, and his comments are not changing. That's between me and my maker, or my. Yes. Yes, go ahead.
Yes. Given the escalating political instability in Venezuela and the movement of refugees and asylum seekers, do you see that political instability having any kind of impact on the ongoing border dispute between Venezuela and Guyana? I know there's a UN process that's going on right now. We very much hope it
doesn't. But obviously, as we've seen in many other places, instability in one country has an impact and can have an impact throughout the region. Evelyn.
Thanks, Steph. Do you have any worries about Mr. Trump tinkering with the Iranian nuclear freeze deal, or that hasn't reached your desk yet? Hinting he might.
No, we've seen the certification given by the State Department, and
yes.
Obviously.
But this would be on missiles.
Yeah. We're not going to, as I say, as the Secretary General said, we're not going to comment on things that have yet to happen. Yeah.
Sure. I wanted to ask you, Uganda has announced that it's stopped searching for Joseph Kony and says he's no longer a threat to their country. Since the UN has, I think it's one of UNOCO's roles, what is the UN? Have they taken note of this? What's the UN's current posture toward the Lord's Resistance Army?
We've taken note of it, and as you know, we've had some involvement in the periphery, but I'll leave it at that.
And I also wanted to ask you, the position of youth advisor that Shramandari had left, it's sort of noted, I wasn't aware of it, but apparently there's been a recruitment for it, but it wasn't done through the Secretary General's website of senior leadership. No. Can you explain why that is?
It's done. No, it's not a matter of less important. It's done exactly in the same way that the previous envoy was recruited, which is we put out outreach to NGOs that deal with youth issues and also with those UN agencies that are part of the youth network, and ask them to put forward candidates, and then the Secretary General's office will go through the recruitment process.
Right, but like Children in Armed Conflict was put on the website.
I'm just saying we're following the procedure that was established for how the previous envoy was recruited.
But I'm asking what the logic of the procedure for this position to not publicize it in the same way as the other ones that you've advertised.
Well, I'm saying the logic is that we're following the procedure that was established.
Not the logic.
That's my logic.
Just to say you've done it before.
That's my logic. Evelyn.
Yes, there was a standoff in Mali, in Timbuktu, and I thought there was some kind of a peace agreement with the Tuareg. Do you have anything more on that?
No, I do not. Okay. Have a good weekend. See you Monday.